They thought I would break. I just waited.
My marriage was like this house, mostly held together with duct tape and denial. Standing in my garage workshop at 6 in the morning, coffee in one hand and a wrench in the other, I should have known that Saturday would be the day everything finally came apart. The text message on my phone lit up like a warning flare. Connor, we need to talk. Coming over with Rick. Tara. Rick. Her boss. The guy who drove a Mercedes and wore suits that cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. The guy who'd been finding excuses to keep my wife at the office until 10 at night for the past 3 months. I'm Connor Hennessy, 38 years old, mechanical engineer at Patterson Manufacturing, and apparently the last person in town to figure out my wife was screwing her boss. My friends had been giving me those pitying looks for weeks, the kind you give a dog that's too stupid to realize it's about to be put down. The doorbell rang at exactly 8:30. Tara always was punctual, even when she was about to destroy my life. I opened the front door to find my wife of 12 years standing next to Rick Farrow like they were posing for a couples magazine. Tara looked gorgeous as always, auburn hair, perfectly styled, wearing that blue dress I'd bought her for our anniversary. Rick stood behind her in his expensive suit, chest puffed out like a rooster in a henhouse. Connor, Tara said, not quite meeting my eyes. Can we come in? Sure thing, I said, stepping aside. Coffee's fresh, though I guess you two have been sharing plenty of morning coffee lately. Rick's jaw tightened. Look, Connor, we need to discuss this like adults. Adults, I repeated, leading them to the living room. Right, adults who sneak around behind their spouse's back for 3 months. That kind of adult behavior. Tara sat on the edge of our couch, the one we'd picked out together at that furniture store in Buffalo 5 years ago. She twisted her wedding ring around her finger, a nervous habit I'd watched her develop since childhood. Connor, I'm sorry, she said. I never meant for it to happen this way. Which way did you mean for it to happen? I asked, settling into my recliner. Were you planning to take out a billboard? Maybe send me a singing telegram? Rick stepped forward, all business. Connor, Tara and I are in love. We want to handle this divorce as cleanly as possible. No lawyers, no drama, just two people who grew apart. I laughed, actually laughed out loud. Two people who grew apart. That's rich, Rick. Is that what you call it when you're banging another man's wife in hotel rooms? Connor! Tara's voice cracked like a whip. What? Too crude for you? Should I say making love instead? Or maybe having intimate relations? Would that make you feel better about what you've been doing? Rick's face was turning red. There's no need to be nasty about this. Nasty? I stood up, all 6 feet 2 inches of me. Rick was shorter, softer, the kind of guy who paid other people to change his oil. You want to see nasty? Nasty is finding lipstick on your wife's collar that doesn't match any lipstick she owns. Nasty is hearing your neighbors whisper and stop talking when you walk by. Nasty is realizing your wife has been lying to your face every single day for months. Tara was crying now, but they weren't the kind of tears that made me want to comfort her. They were the tears of someone who got caught. I'll make this simple, Rick said, pulling out a folder from his briefcase. We've drawn up a separation agreement. You keep the house, Tara keeps her car and personal belongings. We split the savings 50-50. I took the papers and pretended to read them. Generous, really generous. Except for one small problem. What's that? Rick asked. You're not my lawyer, Rick. You're just the guy who's been screwing my wife. You don't get to negotiate my divorce settlement. That's when Rick made his first mistake. He stepped closer, trying to intimidate me. Look, Connor, we're trying to be reasonable here. Don't make this harder than it has to be. Harder? I set the papers down on the coffee table. Rick, buddy, you haven't seen hard yet. Tara looked up at me with those green eyes that had made me fall in love with her in high school. Connor, please, let's just end this with some dignity. Dignity, I repeated. You want dignity? Where was my dignity when you were telling your girlfriends about your affair? Where was my dignity when you were laughing about me at office parties? Rick's face went pale. How did I know about that? Because I'm not as stupid as you think I am, Rick. I'm an engineer. I solve problems for a living. And you two, you're a problem. I walked to my desk and pulled out a manila envelope. See, the thing about being married to someone for 12 years is you learn their patterns. Tara always deletes her browser history after she's been shopping online. But she forgot to delete it after she booked those hotel rooms. She always puts her phone face down when she's texting her sister. But she started putting it face down when she was texting you, Rick. I opened the envelope and spread out printed emails, text messages, and hotel receipts across the coffee table like I was dealing cards. She always pays cash for lunch when she's trying to save money, but she started using her credit card when she was buying lingerie she never wore at home. Tara's face had gone white. Connor, you went through my things? I went through our things, Tara. Joint checking account, remember? Joint credit cards, shared cell phone plan. When you're married, there's no such thing as complete privacy. Rick was staring at the papers on the table. This is invasion of privacy. No, Rick, this is evidence. There's a difference. I picked up one of the printed emails. This one's my favorite. It's from you to Tara, dated 3 weeks ago. Want me to read it out loud? It's pretty steamy stuff. Stop, Tara whispered. Or how about this text message thread? The one where you two are making fun of my Saturday morning workshop routine, calling me Mr. Fix-It like it's some kind of joke? I could see Rick calculating, trying to figure out how much trouble he was in. His company had a strict policy about relationships between supervisors and subordinates. His wife, yeah, Rick was married too, was the daughter of the company's biggest client. What do you want? Rick asked quietly. What do I want? I sat back down, feeling more relaxed than I had in months. I want you to understand something, Rick. I'm not some pathetic husband who's going to roll over and play dead. I'm not going to make this easy for you. I turned to Tara. And you, sweetheart. You think you can just walk away from 12 years of marriage with a handshake and a smile? You think you can humiliate me in front of our friends and neighbors and then ask for dignity? Connor, what are you going to do? Tara's voice was barely a whisper. I smiled, really smiled, for the first time in months. I'm going to show you what happens when you underestimate the underdog. Rick tried to bluster. You can't threaten us, Connor. That's harassment. Threaten you. Rick, I don't need to threaten you. I just need to let your wife know what you've been up to. I need to let your boss know you've been having an affair with a subordinate. I need to let all our mutual friends know exactly how this marriage ended. I stood up and walked to the front door, opening it wide. I think we're done here. Rick grabbed Tara's arm. Come on, let's go. But Tara didn't move. She was staring at me like she was seeing me for the first time. Connor, You what? You're sorry? You didn't mean for it to happen? You still care about me? I shook my head. Save it, Tara. Save it for someone who still believes your lies. After they left, I sat in my living room surrounded by the evidence of my wife's betrayal and started planning. Rick thought he was dealing with some broken-hearted fool who would quietly disappear. Tara thought she could trade up from a blue-collar husband to a white-collar boss without consequences. They were both about to learn how wrong they were. I picked up my phone and dialed my lawyer, Margaret Carter. She was a tough woman in her 50s who'd handled my mom's estate planning and had a reputation for being absolutely ruthless in divorce cases. Maggie, it's Connor Hennessy. I need to see you Monday morning. And Maggie, bring your appetite. This is going to be a feast. Monday morning came with the kind of October chill that promised winter was coming, whether you were ready or not. I sat in Margaret Carter's office, watching her read through the evidence I'd compiled over the past 3 months. Maggie was exactly what you'd want in a divorce lawyer if you were the wronged party. Sharp as a razor, mean as a snake, and absolutely unforgiving when it came to cheating spouses. She wore her gray hair in a tight bun and her reading glasses on a chain around her neck, like a tool she might need to deploy at any moment. Connor, she said, setting down the last of the printed emails, this is a goldmine. Your wife and her boyfriend documented everything. Hotel receipts, romantic dinners, even love letters. It's like they wanted to get caught. So what are my options? In New York, we have no-fault divorce, which means you don't technically need to prove adultery. But having this evidence means we can argue for a bigger share of marital assets based on her misconduct. Maggie leaned back in her leather chair. The question is, how far do you want to take this? As far as legally possible. Good. She smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. Because I've been looking into Mr. Rick Farrow, and he's got some vulnerabilities. She opened a file on her computer and turned the screen toward me. Rick's wife is Jennifer Farrow, daughter of Thomas Brennan. Brennan Industries is Patterson Manufacturing's biggest client. They account for about 40% of your company's revenue. I felt a grin spreading across my face, and so if Jennifer finds out about the affair, she divorces Rick, which means Rick loses his connection to Brennan Industries, which means Patterson Manufacturing might reconsider Rick's position to preserve their relationship with their biggest client. And Tara works for Rick. Exactly. If Rick goes down, Tara goes down with him. Maggie closed the laptop. Connor, I can't advise you to deliberately destroy people's lives, but I can advise you to protect your own interests. And sometimes protecting your own interests has consequences for other people. I left Maggie's office feeling better than I had since this whole nightmare started. For months, I'd felt like a victim, like something pathetic that deserved pity. Now I felt like a hunter who'd finally found his prey. My first stop was Patterson Manufacturing. I needed to talk to Dave Morrison, my best friend and the only person at work who'd had the guts to tell me what everyone else was whispering behind my back. Dave was in the break room when I found him, eating a sandwich and reading the sports page. He looked up when I walked in, and I could see the concern in his eyes. Connor, how are you holding up? Better than expected. I sat down across from him. Dave, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Shoot, how long has everyone at work known about Tara and Rick? Dave set down his sandwich and sighed. Connor, I don't think... How long, Dave? About 6 weeks, maybe 2 months. He looked miserable. Rick hasn't exactly been subtle about it. He's been taking long lunches, leaving early, spending a lot of time on personal phone calls. And then Tara started showing up here more often, always with some excuse about needing to discuss business. Who else knows? Most of the office staff, some of the floor supervisors. Look, Connor, I wanted to tell you, but I didn't know how. And I wasn't completely sure until what? Until I saw them together at that restaurant downtown. Last Friday night, they weren't trying to hide it. I felt that familiar burn of humiliation in my chest, but this time it was mixed with something else. Anger. Pure, clean anger. Dave, I need you to do me a favor. What kind of favor? I need you to keep your ears open around here. If Rick starts acting nervous, if there are any rumors about changes in management, if anyone mentions Brennan Industries pulling their contract, I want to know about it. Dave studied my face. Connor, what are you planning? I'm planning to stop being the victim in this story. That afternoon, I drove to the Starbucks where Tara and her friends met every Tuesday for their weekly gossip session. I knew their routine because I'd been hearing about it for years. Tara would come home full of stories about who was getting divorced, who was having affairs, who was having money problems. I parked across the street and waited. At exactly 3:30, Tara's silver Honda pulled into the parking lot, followed by Lisa Chen's black SUV and Marie Rodriguez's red convertible. The three of them had been friends since college, and they'd turned gossip into an art form. I waited until they were settled at their usual table by the window, then I walked in and ordered a coffee. I could feel Tara's eyes on me as I waited for my order, but I didn't acknowledge her. Instead, I sat at a table close enough to overhear their conversation. So how did Connor take it? Lisa was asking. Better than I expected, Tara said. He was angry, but he wasn't violent or anything. Rick was worried he might try to cause trouble at work. What kind of trouble could Connor cause? Marie asked. Rick's his boss's boss. I don't know. Rick just said Connor seemed too calm, like he was planning something. Maybe he's just in shock, Lisa suggested. I mean, finding out your wife is leaving you for another man has to be devastating. Connor's tougher than people think, Tara said quietly. He doesn't get mad often, but when he does... What? Marie leaned forward. Nothing, it's just Connor's really smart. Smarter than Rick gives him credit for. And he doesn't forget things. I finished my coffee and left without saying a word to any of them. But I could feel Tara watching me through the window as I walked to my truck. That evening, I sat at my workshop and made a list. Not a list of what I wanted to do to Rick and Tara. That would have been a very different kind of list. This was a list of facts, connections, and possibilities. Fact: Rick was having an affair with a subordinate, which violated company policy. Fact: Rick's wife was the daughter of Patterson Manufacturing's biggest client. Fact: Tara had used company resources to facilitate her affair. Company credit cards for dinners, company time for personal phone calls, company computers for personal emails. Connection: If Jennifer Farrow found out about the affair, she would likely divorce Rick. Connection: If Thomas Brennan found out his son-in-law was cheating on his daughter, he would likely reconsider his business relationship with Patterson Manufacturing. Connection: If Patterson Manufacturing had to choose between Rick and their biggest client, Rick would lose. Possibility? If Rick lost his job, Tara would lose her protection at work. Possibility. If both Rick and Tara were unemployed, their plans for a new life together might become more complicated. Possibility. If their affair became public knowledge, their reputations in our small community would be destroyed. I wasn't planning to do anything illegal. I wasn't planning to hurt anyone physically. I was just planning to make sure the truth came to light in the most inconvenient way possible. I picked up my phone and started making calls. The first call was to my cousin Jimmy, who worked as a photographer for the local newspaper. Jimmy owed me a favor. I'd rebuilt the engine in his motorcycle last summer for free. Jimmy, it's Connor. I need to ask you about something. If someone wanted to make sure a certain piece of information became public knowledge, how would they go about it? What kind of information? The kind that people would be interested in reading about. The kind that involves prominent local business people behaving badly. There was a pause. Connor, are you talking about what I think you're talking about? I'm talking about making sure the truth gets told. Well, Jimmy said slowly, hypothetically speaking, if someone had documentation of interesting behavior, and if that behavior involved people who were public figures in the community, it might be newsworthy, especially if there were legal or business implications. Hypothetically. Hypothetically, of course, the documentation would have to be solid. Photos, documents, credible witnesses, that sort of thing. I understand. Connor, are you sure you want to go down this road? Once something like this gets out, there's no taking it back. I looked around my workshop, at the tools I'd collected over 20 years, at the projects I'd completed, at the life I'd built with my own hands. Then I thought about Tara and Rick sitting in that restaurant, laughing about their secret while I sat at home like a fool. Jimmy, I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Wednesday morning brought the first real test of my plan. I'd spent Tuesday evening parked outside the Marriott downtown, the same hotel where Tara and Rick had been meeting for their romantic encounters. I had my camera, a telephoto lens I'd borrowed from Jimmy, and more patience than I'd ever thought I possessed. At 12:15 p.m., Rick's silver Mercedes pulled into the hotel parking lot. At 12:20 p.m., Tara's Honda arrived. They didn't walk in together. Rick went first, then Tara followed 5 minutes later. They thought they were being clever. I waited in my truck, engine running, heat on low. The October air was getting colder, and I could see my breath when I exhaled. At 2:45 p.m., Rick emerged from the hotel first, straightening his tie and checking his phone. He looked satisfied with himself, like a man who thought he was getting away with something. Tara came out 8 minutes later, her hair slightly messed despite her attempts to fix it in the hotel bathroom. She was wearing the red coat I'd given her for Christmas 2 years ago. I followed Rick back to Patterson Manufacturing, staying 3 cars behind. I'd driven these streets for 15 years. I knew every shortcut and back route. Rick drove like a man without a care in the world. At the office, I went straight to Dave's workstation. Dave, I need another favor. He looked up from his computer screen. What now? I need you to find out Rick's schedule for the rest of the week. Meetings, appointments, anything that might take him out of the office. Connor, this is starting to feel like stalking. It's not stalking, it's reconnaissance. I pulled up a chair. Dave, Rick, and my wife are having an affair on company time, using company resources. Rick's violating company policy and potentially exposing Patterson Manufacturing to a lawsuit. I'm not the bad guy here. Dave was quiet for a moment. What exactly are you planning to do with his schedule? I'm planning to make sure the right people know what's been going on. The right people? Rick's wife, Rick's father-in-law. Maybe a few other interested parties. Dave stared at me. Connor, if you destroy Rick's marriage and his career, you're going to destroy Tara too. Tara made her choice, Dave. She chose Rick over our marriage. She chose her affair over our friendship. She chose to humiliate me in front of our entire community. I'm just making sure there are consequences for those choices. That afternoon, I drove to the offices of Brennan Industries. It was a sleek glass building on the outskirts of town, the kind of place that screamed success and money. Thomas Brennan had built his company from nothing, starting with a small construction business and growing it into a multi-million-dollar operation. I didn't go inside. Instead, I sat in the parking lot and watched the employees come and go. At 4:30 p.m., a black BMW pulled out of the executive parking space. The license plate read Brennan 1. I followed the BMW to an upscale neighborhood about 10 minutes away. Thomas Brennan pulled into the driveway of a large colonial house with perfectly manicured landscaping. This was where Rick's wife had grown up. where she'd learned that certain standards of behavior were expected from people in their social position. I parked across the street and took out my phone. I'd been carrying Jennifer Farrow's number in my wallet for 3 months, ever since I'd found it in Rick's contact list on Tara's phone. I'd been waiting for the right moment to use it. The phone rang twice before she answered. "Hello, Mrs. Farrow, this is Connor Hennessy. I think we need to talk." There was a pause. "I'm sorry, do I know you?" "I'm married to Tara Hennessy. She works for your husband." Another pause, longer this time. "What do you want to talk about?" "I think you know what I want to talk about, Mrs. Farrow. The question is whether you want to have this conversation over the phone or in person." I think in person would be better. There's a coffee shop called Grounds for Discussion on Maple Street. Can you meet me there in an hour?" "Yes, I'll be there." I arrived at the coffee shop 15 minutes early and chose a table in the back corner, away from the windows. Jennifer Farrow walked in exactly on time, and I recognized her immediately from the photos in Rick's office. She was an attractive woman in her early 40s. Blonde hair, expensive clothes, the kind of woman who'd never had to worry about money. She sat down across from me, her hands folded on the table. "Mr. Hennessy, I want you to know that I appreciate you calling me directly instead of making this more public. Mrs. Farrow, I'm not interested in embarrassing you, but I think you deserve to know what your husband has been doing." I slid a manila envelope across the table. "These are copies. Hotel receipts, restaurant bills, text messages, emails, everything is documented." She opened the envelope with shaking hands and began reading. I watched her face change as she processed what she was seeing. Surprise, hurt, anger, and finally, a cold determination that reminded me of her father. "How long?" she asked quietly. "About 3 months that I can prove. Maybe longer. And you're telling me this because?" "Because Rick and my wife want to divorce us so they can be together. They think they can just walk away from their marriages without consequences. I don't agree." Jennifer closed the envelope and looked at me directly. "What do you want from me, Mr. Hennessy?" "I want Rick to understand that actions have consequences. I want him to lose everything, the same way he's taken everything from me. And my marriage, my family. Mrs. Farrow, your marriage was over the moment your husband decided to cheat on you. I'm just making sure you know about it before you waste any more years of your life." She was quiet for a long time, staring at the envelope. Finally, she looked up at me. "My father's going to be very interested in this information." I thought he might be. "Rick thinks he's untouchable because of his position at Patterson Manufacturing. He thinks my father will always protect him because of me." "What do you think?" Jennifer Farrow smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "I think Rick has seriously underestimated my father and me." She stood up, tucking the envelope under her arm. "Mr. Hennessy, thank you for bringing this to my attention. I think you'll find that the situation at Patterson Manufacturing is going to change very quickly." "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to call a family meeting tonight. Rick, my father, and me. We're going to discuss Rick's future with the company." She paused at the door. "And Mr. Hennessy, I hope you get everything you deserve in your divorce." After she left, I sat in the coffee shop for another hour, thinking about what I'd just set in motion. By tomorrow morning, Rick's world was going to start falling apart. By the end of the week, both Rick and Tara would understand what it felt like to have their lives turned upside down. I drove home feeling lighter than I had in months. For the first time since this nightmare started, I felt like I was in control of my own story. My phone rang as I pulled into my driveway. It was Dave. "Connor, you need to know something. Rick just got a phone call, and then he left the office in a hurry. He looked like he'd seen a ghost." "What time did he leave?" "About 20 minutes ago." "Connor, what did you do?" "I told the truth, Dave. Sometimes that's all it takes." That night, I sat in my workshop and waited. I knew Rick would come. Men like Rick always came when they felt cornered. They always thought they could intimidate their way out of trouble. At 9:30 p.m., I heard a car pull into my driveway. Through the window, I could see Rick getting out of his Mercedes, his face twisted with anger. He walked to my front door and started pounding on it like he was trying to break it down. I opened the door and stepped back. "Rick, come in." He pushed past me into the living room, his face red with rage. "You son of a witch! You went to my wife." "I did. You destroyed my marriage." "No, Rick, you destroyed your marriage when you decided to cheat on your wife with mine. Jennifer's filing for divorce. Her father is pulling the Brennan Industries contract. I'm going to lose my job." I sat down in my recliner, completely calm. That sounds like a personal problem, Rick. This isn't over, Connor. You think you can destroy my life and just walk away? I think I can defend myself when someone tries to destroy my life first. I leaned forward. Rick, you made a choice. You chose to have an affair with my wife. You chose to humiliate me in front of our community. You chose to think you could take everything I cared about without consequences. This is what consequences look like. Rick took a step toward me, his fists clenched. You have no idea what you've done. I stood up, and Rick remembered that I was 6 inches taller and 50 pounds heavier than him. I worked with my hands for a living. He worked at a desk. If he wanted to make this physical, it would be over very quickly. Rick, I know exactly what I've done. I've made sure that everyone knows the truth about what kind of man you are. I've made sure that your wife knows she deserves better than a cheating husband. And I've made sure that you understand there are consequences for your actions. Tara's going to lose her job too. Then she should have thought about that before she decided to have an affair with her boss. Rick stared at me for a long moment, and I could see him calculating. He was trying to figure out if there was any way to salvage the situation, any way to turn this around. What do you want, Connor? Money? I can pay you to keep quiet about this. I laughed. Rick, it's too late for that. Your wife already knows. Her father already knows. By tomorrow, everyone at Patterson Manufacturing is going to know. You can't buy your way out of this. Then what? What do you want? I want you to leave. I want you to leave my house, leave my wife alone, and leave town if you're smart. Because, Rick, this is just the beginning. If you think I'm done making your life difficult, you're wrong. Rick opened his mouth to say something else, then seemed to think better of it. He walked to the door, then turned back to me. This isn't over, Connor. Yes, it is, Rick. You just don't know it yet. After he left, I poured myself a whiskey and sat in my workshop thinking about tomorrow. Rick thought he was threatening me, but he was wrong. I wasn't afraid of Rick Farrow. I wasn't afraid of anyone anymore. My phone buzzed with a text message from Tara. Connor, we need to talk. Rick told me what you did. I typed back, no, we don't. We're done talking, Tara. From now on, you can talk to my lawyer. I turned off my phone and finished my whiskey. Tomorrow was going to be a very interesting day. Thursday morning came with the sound of my phone ringing at 6:30 a.m. I'd been awake for an hour already, sitting in my kitchen with coffee and the newspaper, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Connor? It was Dave, and he sounded excited. You need to get down here. All heck is breaking loose. What's happening? Rick's been fired. Security escorted him out of the building 20 minutes ago. And Tara... Connor, they fired Tara too. I felt a surge of satisfaction so intense it was almost physical. When? Rick got called into a meeting with the plant manager at 8 o'clock yesterday evening. He was gone for 2 hours, and when he came back, he cleaned out his office. This morning, HR called Tara and told her not to come in. What's the official reason? Violation of company policy regarding relationships between supervisors and subordinates, misuse of company resources, the whole thing. I finished my coffee and got dressed for work. For the first time in months, I was actually looking forward to going to the office. The atmosphere at Patterson Manufacturing was electric. I could feel the buzz of gossip and speculation as soon as I walked through the front door. People were clustered in small groups, whispering and glancing around nervously. Dave met me at my workstation with a huge grin on his face. Connor, you should see the email that went out this morning. It's a new policy about workplace relationships and professional conduct. They're not naming names, but everyone knows what it's about. Any word on who's taking over Rick's position? Temporarily, it's going to be Janet Morrison from the Buffalo office. Long-term, they're talking about promoting from within. Dave paused. Connor, there's something else. People are saying that Brennan Industries didn't just pull their contract. They're actively telling other companies in the industry what happened. Meaning Rick's not going to be able to get another job in this field. Not around here, anyway. I spent the morning catching up on the work that had been neglected while Rick was distracted by his affair. It felt good to focus on something concrete, something I could fix with my hands and my brain. At lunch, I drove to the diner downtown, where Tara and I used to eat breakfast on Sunday mornings. I wasn't surprised to find her there, sitting alone in a corner booth, staring at a cup of coffee that had probably gone cold an hour ago. She looked up when I approached, and I could see that she'd been crying. Her eyes were red and puffy, and her hair wasn't styled with its usual perfection. Connor, she said quietly, I was hoping you'd come. I slid into the booth across from her. Tara. They fired me. They fired both of us. I heard. Rick says you went to his wife. You told her about us. I did. Why? Her voice cracked. Why would you do that? I studied her face, looking for any sign of the woman I'd fallen in love with 20 years ago. Tara, do you really not understand why I did it? You were angry, I get that. But Connor, you destroyed our lives. Rick and I, we love each other. We were going to build something together. With what? You're both unemployed? Rick's wife is divorcing him and taking half of everything he owns. His reputation in this industry is ruined. What exactly were you planning to build? Tara's hands were shaking as she reached for her coffee cup. We'll figure it out. We'll move somewhere else. Start over. Will you? Because Rick doesn't strike me as the kind of man who handles adversity very well. When things get tough, when money gets tight, when the stress starts building, is Rick going to stick around? You don't know him. I know men like him, Tara. I've worked with them my whole life. Rick's used to having things easy. He's used to having money and status and respect. When all of that goes away, when he's just another unemployed middle-aged man with no prospects, that's when you'll find out what Rick's really made of. Tara was crying now, but I didn't feel any sympathy for her. Connor, please, can't we work this out? Can't we find a way to fix this? Fix what, Tara? Our marriage? You ended our marriage when you decided to sleep with Rick. My trust in you? You destroyed that when you lied to me for 3 months. My respect for you? You threw that away when you made me a joke in front of our friends and neighbors. I never meant for any of this to happen, but it did happen, and now you're dealing with the consequences. I stood up to leave, then turned back to her. Tara, I want you to remember something. I didn't destroy your life. You did that all by yourself. I just made sure everyone knew about it. That afternoon, I had a meeting with Maggie Carter to discuss the divorce proceedings. She was in an excellent mood when I arrived at her office. Connor, I have to hand it to you. When you decide to take someone down, you don't mess around. What's the latest? Rick's wife filed for divorce this morning. She's asking for everything, the house, the cars, half of his retirement accounts, alimony. And with the evidence of his affair, she's likely to get most of it. What about Tara? That's the beautiful part. With both of them unemployed, Tara's in no position to make demands. She can't afford her own lawyer, she can't afford to fight a prolonged legal battle, and she has no leverage. Maggie opened a file on her desk. I've drawn up a settlement agreement. You keep the house, the workshop, your retirement accounts, and your truck. She gets her car, her personal belongings, and whatever's left in your joint savings account after legal fees. How much is left in savings? About $1,200? I almost laughed. $1,200 to start her new life with Rick. Connor, there's something else. I got a call from Rick's lawyer this morning. Rick wants to know if you'd be willing to sign a non-disclosure agreement in exchange for a cash payment. How much? $50,000. I thought about it for exactly 2 seconds. No. Are you sure? That's a lot of money. Maggie, this was never about money. This was about making sure there were consequences for what they did. If I take Rick's money and promise to keep quiet, then he wins. He gets to pay his way out of trouble and nothing changes. So what do you want me to tell his lawyer? Tell him that Rick should have thought about the consequences before he decided to have an affair with my wife. That evening, I was in my workshop when I heard a car pull into my driveway. I looked out the window and saw Tara's Honda, but she wasn't alone. Rick was in the passenger seat, and they were both staring at my house like they were planning something. I walked outside to meet them. Rick got out of the car first, and I could see that the stress was getting to him. He looked like he'd aged 5 years in the past week. Connor, he said, we need to talk. I thought we covered everything last night, Rick. This has gone far enough. You've made your point. Now let's be reasonable about this. Tara got out of the car and stood beside Rick. She was wearing jeans and a sweater, and she looked smaller somehow, diminished. Connor, she said, Rick and I are leaving town. We're going to start over somewhere else. Can't we just end this without any more drama? Where are you going to go? What are you going to do for money? Rick stepped forward. That's not your concern anymore. You're right, it's not. I looked at both of them standing there in my driveway, and I felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no sadness, no regret. Just empty. So why are you here? We want you to stop, Tara said. Stop telling people about us. Stop trying to ruin our lives. Tara, I haven't said a word to anyone since Tuesday. I didn't have to. The truth has a way of spreading all by itself. Rick was getting agitated. Connor, I offered you $50,000 to sign a non-disclosure agreement. That's a generous offer. It's not generous, Rick. It's desperate. You're trying to buy your way out of the consequences of your actions. What do you want then? What will it take to make this stop? I looked at Rick, then at Tara, then back at Rick. I want you to understand something. Both of you. You thought you could take everything that mattered to me, my wife, my marriage, my dignity, my reputation, and there wouldn't be any consequences. You thought I was just some blue-collar nobody who would roll over and take it. I stepped closer to them. But here's the thing. I'm not nobody. I'm the guy who fixes things when they break. I'm the guy who solves problems that other people can't solve. And when someone tries to break my life, I fix that too. Connor, Tara started to say, I'm not finished. I held up my hand. You want to know what I want? I want you to live with the consequences of your choices. I want Rick to explain to his next employer why he was fired for having an affair. I want you, Tara, to explain to your next boyfriend why your marriage ended. I want both of you to remember, every single day for the rest of your lives, that actions have consequences. Rick's face was red with anger. You self-righteous bastard! You think you're so much better than us? No, Rick, I just think I'm smarter than you. They left after that, and I watched their taillights disappear down the street. I had a feeling it would be the last time I'd see either of them. My phone rang as I was walking back to the house. It was Jimmy, my cousin from the newspaper. Connor, I've got some news you're going to want to hear. What's that? Remember that hypothetical conversation we had about newsworthy information? Well, it turns out that information has become very newsworthy. We're running a story tomorrow about corruption and misconduct at local businesses. Corruption? Well, misuse of company resources, violation of employment policies, that sort of thing. It seems that several local business leaders have been engaging in behavior that their shareholders and clients find interesting. I smiled. That does sound newsworthy. Connor, by tomorrow afternoon, everyone in town is going to know exactly what happened and who was involved. Are you ready for that? I looked at my house, my workshop, my life that I'd built with my own hands. Jimmy, I've been ready for that since this whole thing started. Good, because once this story runs, there's no going back. There was no going back the moment Rick and Tara decided to have an affair. Everything that happens after this is just consequences. After I hung up, I sat in my workshop and thought about tomorrow. By this time next week, everyone in town would know the whole story. Rick and Tara would be gone, probably to some city where nobody knew them, where they could try to start over. But they'd never really start over because they'd always know what they were capable of. They'd always know that when things got difficult, when temptation presented itself, they'd chosen the easy path instead of the right path. And Rick would always know that he'd been outsmarted by a blue-collar nobody who fixed things for a living. I poured myself a whiskey and raised the glass in a toast to my empty workshop. Here's to consequences, I said out loud. Tomorrow was going to be a very good day. Friday morning arrived with the kind of crisp October weather that made you glad to be alive. I woke up early, made coffee, and drove to the gas station to buy a copy of the local newspaper. The story was on the front page, below the fold. Local business leaders face misconduct allegations. Jimmy had done a thorough job. He'd interviewed sources at Patterson Manufacturing, spoken with employees who'd witnessed Rick and Tara's inappropriate behavior, and even gotten a comment from Thomas Brennan about the importance of ethical business practices and personal integrity. The article didn't mention my name, but it didn't have to. Anyone who knew Rick and Tara would be able to fill in the blanks. I was finishing my second cup of coffee when my phone rang. It was my mother calling from her retirement community in Florida. Connor, I just got off the phone with your Aunt Helen. She says there's a story in the newspaper about Tara. That's right, Mom. Are you okay, sweetheart? I'm better than okay. I'm good. There was a pause. Connor, I want you to know that I'm proud of you. For what? For standing up for yourself. Your father would have been proud too. My dad had died 5 years ago, and I still missed his advice. He'd been a mechanic, a man who believed in hard work, honesty, and taking responsibility for your actions. Thanks, Mom. What are you going to do now? I'm going to get divorced, keep my house, and get on with my life. Good. You deserve better than Tara, Connor. You always did. At work, the atmosphere was completely different from the day before. Instead of nervous whispers and speculation, there was a sense of relief, like a storm had passed and left clean air behind. Dave found me at my workstation around 10 o'clock. Connor, have you seen the newspaper? I have. Everyone's talking about it. People are saying Rick got what he deserved. What do you think? Dave grinned. I think you're a lot more dangerous than you look. That afternoon, I had lunch at the diner downtown. The same diner where I'd confronted Tara the day before. The waitress, a woman named Helen who'd been working there for 20 years, brought me coffee without being asked. Connor, I read the story in the paper. I'm sorry about what happened to your marriage. Thanks, Helen. For what it's worth, I never liked that Rick Farrow. He used to come in here with his wife, and he treated her like she was invisible. A man who doesn't respect his wife doesn't respect anybody. I think you're right about that. And Tara, well, I always thought she was too good for her own good, if you know what I mean. Some people think they deserve more than they've earned. After lunch, I drove past the apartment complex where Rick had been living since his wife kicked him out. His Mercedes wasn't in the parking lot, and when I asked the manager, she told me he'd moved out that morning. Didn't leave a forwarding address, she said. Paid his lease termination fee in cash and was gone by noon. I drove by Tara's sister's house, where Tara had been staying since our separation. The driveway was empty, and there was a for rent sign in the yard of the duplex next door where Tara's sister lived. They were gone, both of them, just like that. That evening, I met Maggie Carter for dinner at a steakhouse on the outskirts of town. She was in an excellent mood. Connor, I have to tell you, in 30 years of practicing law, I've never seen someone execute a plan like that. It was surgical. It wasn't really a plan, Maggie. I just decided to stop being a victim and start being a problem. Well, whatever you want to call it, it worked. Rick's gone, Tara's gone, and you're free to start over. What's the final settlement look like? Better than we hoped. Since Tara left town without contesting anything, we can proceed with an uncontested divorce. You keep everything except her personal belongings and her car. The whole thing should be finalized within 60 days. And Rick? Rick's problems are just beginning. His wife's divorce attorney is very good, and she's not feeling generous. Plus, there are rumors that the state labor department is investigating Patterson Manufacturing's handling of the whole situation. Rick might be facing fines or other penalties. We ordered steaks and a bottle of wine, and for the first time in months, I felt like celebrating. Maggie, can I ask you something? Sure. Do you think I went too far? She considered the question while she cut her steak. Connor, your wife had an affair with her boss. They used company resources to facilitate their relationship. They humiliated you in front of your community. They violated company policy and potentially exposed their employer to legal liability. Right. All you did was make sure the appropriate people knew what was happening. Rick's wife deserved to know her husband was cheating. Thomas Brennan deserved to know his son-in-law was violating company policy. The community deserved to know what kind of people they were dealing with. She took a sip of wine. Connor, you didn't plant evidence. You didn't lie about anyone. You didn't break any laws. You just made sure the truth came to light. If Rick and Tara couldn't handle the consequences of their actions, that's not your fault. So you don't think I was vindictive? I think you were effective. There's a difference. After dinner, I drove home through the quiet streets of my neighborhood. The leaves were starting to turn, and there was a hint of winter in the air. In a few weeks, I'd be winterizing my workshop, getting ready for the cold months ahead. But for the first time in years, I was looking forward to winter. I was looking forward to the quiet, the solitude, the chance to work on projects without distractions. I pulled into my driveway and sat in my truck for a few minutes, looking at my house. It was a good house, solid and well-built. It had good bones, as my father used to say. With a little work, a little attention, it could be beautiful again. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Connor, this is Tara. I wanted you to know we're leaving town. I'm sorry for everything that happened. I hope you can find some happiness. I stared at the message for a long time, then deleted it without responding. There was nothing left to say to Tara. Our story was over. I went inside and poured myself a whiskey, then walked out to my workshop. I had a project I'd been putting off for months, rebuilding the engine in my 1960 Camaro. It was going to be a long project, something that would take all winter to complete. But I had time now. I had all the time in the world. I opened the hood of the Camaro and looked at the engine that needed rebuilding. It was going to be a lot of work, but I was good at fixing things that were broken. I was good at taking something that had been damaged and making it better than it was before. I picked up my wrench and got to work. 6 months later, I was putting the finishing touches on the Camaro's engine when Dave stopped by the workshop. "Connor, you've got to see this." He handed me a newspaper clipping from a paper in Atlanta. The headline read, "Local man arrested for embezzlement." Below it was a photo of Rick Farrow being led away in handcuffs. According to the article, Rick had been working as a sales manager for a construction company in Atlanta. He'd been caught stealing money from client accounts to pay for personal expenses, including an expensive apartment and a new car. "Looks like Rick didn't learn his lesson," Dave said. I read the article twice, then handed it back to Dave. "Some people never do. What about Tara? What about her?" The article mentions that Rick was living with an unnamed woman who was also employed by the company. She was fired, but not charged. I thought about that for a moment. So Tara's unemployed again in a city where she doesn't know anyone, with a boyfriend who's going to prison. Sounds like a tough situation. Sounds like consequences. I went back to work on the Camaro's engine. The car was almost ready for its first test drive, and I was looking forward to taking it out on the highway, feeling the power of an engine I'd rebuilt with my own hands. Dave watched me work for a few minutes. "Connor, do you ever regret what you did?" I thought about the question while I adjusted the carburetor. Did I regret exposing Rick and Tara's affair? Did I regret destroying their plans for a new life together? Did I regret the chain of events that had led to Rick's arrest and Tara's current situation? "No," I said finally. "I don't regret any of it." "Why not?" "Because they made their choices, Dave. Every step of the way, they had opportunities to do the right thing. They could have ended their marriages honorably before starting a relationship with each other. They could have been honest about their feelings instead of sneaking around and lying. They could have accepted responsibility for their actions instead of trying to blame everyone else." I stood up and wiped my hands on a rag. But they didn't make those choices. They chose deception over honesty. They chose selfishness over responsibility. They chose to hurt people instead of dealing with their problems like adults. And now they're dealing with the consequences. That's right, and those consequences aren't my fault. They're the natural result of the choices Rick and Tara made. Dave nodded. "I guess you're right." "I know I'm right, Dave, because I learned something important from this whole experience." "What's that?" "I learned that you don't have to be a victim. You don't have to just accept it when people try to take advantage of you or hurt you or treat you like you don't matter. You can fight back. You can make sure there are consequences for bad behavior." I looked at the Camaro, its engine purring smoothly after months of careful work. And sometimes, when you stand up for yourself, when you refuse to be pushed around, you discover that you're stronger than you thought you were. Dave smiled. "So what's next for you, Connor?" "Next, I'm going to take this car for a drive, then I'm going to start looking for my next project. Another car? Maybe, or maybe something completely different. The point is, I've got options now. I've got time, I've got money, and I've got my self-respect back." Dave left, and I spent the rest of the evening fine-tuning the Camaro's engine. When I was satisfied with the sound, I closed the hood and stepped back to admire my work. The car looked beautiful, better than it had when it was new, because now it had been rebuilt by someone who cared about quality and craftsmanship. I thought about Rick and Tara, somewhere in Atlanta, dealing with the latest consequences of their choices. I wondered if they ever thought about me, if they ever regretted the way they'd treated me. But it didn't matter. Their story was their story, and mine was mine. I turned off the lights in the workshop and walked back to the house. Tomorrow I was going to take the Camaro out for its first real drive. I was going to feel the power of that rebuilt engine, hear the sound of exhaust pipes that I'd installed myself, experience the satisfaction of driving something I'd created with my own hands. And after that, I was going to start planning my next project. Because I'd learned that the best revenge wasn't getting even with the people who'd hurt you. The best revenge was building a life so good that you forgot why you wanted revenge in the first place. I poured myself one last whiskey and raised the glass in a toast to my quiet house, my well-equipped workshop, and my uncertain but promising future. "Here's to new beginnings," I said out loud. And for the first time in years, I meant it.